Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Crowning Moment podcast. Today, we have another very special guest. We have the new Miss Teen USA. So let's go ahead and welcome her to the podcast today. How are you?
Hi, Casey. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Let's just jump right into it. Tell us a little bit about your crowning moment just a few nights ago. What was that like being in that final two?
So, if some of you don't know, my name is Umasofia, and I was formerly Miss New Jersey Teen USA. And to be honest, I had no idea that I was going to be in the final two. You can actually see my reactions, top 5, top 20, when they were called. I was so shocked. I was so genuinely shocked and happy that, the selection committee thought that I was obviously like I'm good enough to hold this title and to gain the opportunity of being the next Miss Teen USA. But the first thing that I thought about is how lucky I was to be standing up on a stage with so many other talented, ambitious young women. I know I got really close with my first runner up, and either way, like we told each other, either way it went, we would be happy for the other because one thing that I really liked about this year, our new CEO of Miss USA, Layla Rose, really put an emphasis on each and every one of our unique and singular platforms. And whether a girl won or not, that voice was put out there. Her purpose was put out there. And so I was most excited when I realized, when it kind of finally settled in that, oh my God, I looked down and I have the Miss Teen USA sash on to get started spreading the message um, of the importance of education and representation and inclusivity, which is why I joined pageantry in the first place. I had never done it growing up. And what really attracted me to it is one, the sisterhood. I loved seeing the photos of all the girls rushing the winner when she was crowned. And two, I had always grown up with the value that charity was very important. And ultimately, Miss USA, Miss Teen USA are philanthropy organizations. And I love that this year, with the new rule that interviews 50% of the competition and really our platforms are put at the forefront, I love these new changes.
That is amazing. And with that interview being 50%, what was the preparation looking like coming into the competition after winning New Jersey Teen USA?
So this was my third pageant ever. I had first competed for Miss New Jersey Teen USA in 2022, and I placed first runner up, and I had no coaching, no nothing. And I was honestly really, again, shocked that I could achieve something like that because I had no knowledge of the pageant world. And so I wasn't planning to come back, but my dad actually convinced me, and he was like, why don't you give it another shot? And I was like, okay. So, my state coach was a lady who had been a former Miss New Jersey, and I worked for her. I worked with her on the state level, and then I won. And then after that, we had our state sponsors who I worked with, and ultimately it was just interview prep, top 5 question. I got in shape with our fitness sponsor, Scott Fitness, and that's all well and good, all of the nitty-gritty thing that every pageant girl goes through, practicing interview, but really what it takes is all the behind the scenes work. Like, are you devoting time to your charity? Are you devoting time to yourself to make sure that your mental health is okay? Because it can be very difficult as a title holder to balance, everything that's going on and wanting to do good, but also, keeping yourself sane, because you cannot do good for other people if you are not in control of your own emotions. So when I was competing for Miss Teen USA, I made a promise to myself that I wouldn't make the crown and sash my only goal because there's so much more to gain from the weekend. I found a best friend in my roommate who I was rooming with Rhode Island, and we joked that we were the real life Sandra Bullock and Rhode Island from Miss Congeniality because that's how I truly felt about her. And I gained so much more out of the weekend. And the fact that I walked out with the crown and sash was truly such an amazing honor and experience. But there's so much more that the organization has to offer. And I want other people to see that.
And one of the interesting questions they also asked this weekend was about, or they named how many authors were in the Teen USA division, and you were one of them. So, will you tell the listeners a little bit about, things that you've written being an author?
Yeah, so about 4 years ago now, I started my blog called That's Fan Behavior. And it was really the first platform where I talked about my experience as a woman of color. I'm half Mexican, half Indian. And growing up biracial, there's not much representation for people like me. And there were certainly times that I felt like I had no place. And overall, that platform kind of snowballed into something where now I talk about current events. I'm very interested in politics, as one day I want to be a UN ambassador. And I was able to interview some really interesting change makers like the Mexican consul of New Jersey, the founder of Lotus Petal Foundation, which is an organization I work with that helps kids living in the slums of India to get underprivileged, to get access to education. And then during this year, I took a step back. Something I always wanted to do was write my own children's book. But I think for so long, I had kind of convinced myself that it was out of reach. It was like a far off dream. But then I finally decided, like, no, I'm going to do this. So I illustrated and wrote my children's book, The White Jaguar, which follows a little white jaguar. Her name is Nieve, which means snow in Spanish. And because her coat is different from the other jaguars, she feels like she doesn't belong. And so ultimately, she goes on a story of a self acceptance journey, which reflects my own. And it was really special because I was able to include the four languages I had grown up speaking at home: Hindi, Spanish, French, and English. And it made it really personal to me because my dad had always growing up, my dad had always called me his little jaguar. So having that book and having written it is almost like writing a letter to my younger self. And I hope that it can inspire people of all ages to really embrace what makes them unique, because often we're convinced that our differences are wrong or bad, or there are flaws, but differences are not our flaws at all. Our differences make the world go round, and I really want to emphasize that during my reign.
Absolutely. And that goes right into our next question of what do you want to accomplish this year as the new Miss Teen USA?
Well, like I said in my question, I want to lead with an open mind and an open heart. When, as I said, like, I didn't always feel accepted, and I would never ever want someone to be in that position. So ultimately, I want to promote inclusivity and representation for not just my communities that I come from, but across the board. And also, I am still very passionate about bringing education to underprivileged kids. I actually had a book collection program that I started in New Jersey, partnering with Bridges to Books, which was a local book donation organization. And I plan to, as I travel along the United States this year, I plan to collect books and read The White Jaguar to kids living in low income areas. In hospitals, anything that I can do to help and make education more accessible. Because I know that in my darkest times, I turn to my studies. And I know it's not something that everyone can do, because it's a privilege, and it shouldn't be. It's a human right.
That is amazing. And last question before we sign off here, I ask everyone the same final question, and that's in what way has pageants positively impacted you?
Oh, well, I can name like 100 ways that it's positively impacted me. I actually joined pageants because at the time, I was bullied for most of my life growing up, and I was never a shy girl, but I had kind of retreated into myself, and I wanted to do something that would challenge me, that would break out of my comfort zone. And so, like I mentioned, when I saw that picture of all the girls, really having that sorority, I was like, that could be me. And when it did happen to me, that is still the happiest moment of both my crowning, state level and national. Um, so yeah, I think I think pageantry has really given me not only a sisterhood, but it's also helped me discover myself and find my purpose in the process. Because you have to know yourself really well if you want to be a title holder. I think that's what I stress on the most.
That is amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Crowning Moment Podcast. And you guys, you heard it here first. This is the new Miss Teen USA. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Casey.
Awesome. Well, signing off, you never know what happens in the future. So I guess you'll have to check out next week on another episode of The Crowning Moment. Bye, guys.